time with us today, for being on time, and joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the case for a unified talent intelligence platform for talent management, talent acquisition. A little bit of a mouthful, but we're going to be untapping a trend that we're seeing a lot more often recently, which is the convergence of these two historically siloed areas of talent acquisition, and management technology. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce my co-host here today. I'm joined by Grant Weinberg, the Vice President, Global Talent Acquisition, Operations and Technology at TriNet, and Mihir Gandhi, the Vice President of Strategic Marketing at Eightfold. My name is David Francis. I'm the Head of Research for Talent Tech Labs. And we'll do a little bit deeper introduction. The way we're going to set this up, we're going to do a little bit of kind of a research overview, and then we're going to do a deep dive case study with Grant. And so once we get into the case study section, I'll let Grant spend a bit more time introducing himself and TriNet as well. Move us forward, Caroline. So to set the stage for today's agenda, we'll start. We're going to spend maybe a minute or so just doing a quick overview of Talent Tech Labs and Eightfold, and kind of the collaboration we did to put this briefing and research paper together. I'll spend about 10 minutes or so discussing some of the research findings from a paper that we published on the business case for a unified talent intelligence platform. And really the idea is to set the stage for section 3, which is going to be the vast majority of the discussion today. So that'll be a panel discussion primarily with Grant and Mihir around a unified AI talent intelligence platform, looking at a practical application, which is how TriNet implemented one of these, and what are some of the early results and learnings and applications that they've had. And then we'll end with a conclusion and a bit of question and answers if you guys have any. One quick note on Q&A is you have the ability to post a question at any time, especially during the interactive section where we're chatting with Grant. If you have a question, instead of kind of saving it till the end, feel free to ask anytime, and we'll do our best to address it right away. All right, with that, we can jump right in. For those of you who aren't familiar with Talent Tech Labs, we're the only research and advisory firm kind of focused primarily on talent acquisition technology, serving primarily the Fortune 1000, as well as staffing organizations going through a digital transformation. So our mission is to elevate the state of the art in recruiting, do it primarily through decision support and kind of mapping the vendor landscape and hopefully making some sense of a lot of the noise that's out there in the market. You can move us forward. I want to give you, Mihir, a quick minute to introduce yourself and Eightfold.
Yeah, thank you so much, David, and thanks to everyone who made the time to be here today. My name is Mihir Gandhi. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Marketing here at Eightfold. Prior to this role, I actually built and ran the professional services and customer success teams at Eightfold. So the topic of bringing this to bear is near and dear to my heart. And Grant, thank you for taking the time to be with us here today as well. A little bit about Eightfold. The Eightfold Talent Intelligence Platform is a purpose-built and deep learning artificial intelligence technology. It's powered by an ever-refreshing global data set of billions of data points and over 1.4 million unique skills. And it's this combination of the AI platform and global data that delivers unbiased career opportunities and pathways for every individual, for candidates, for employees, for business leaders, for contractors. And as we'll discuss in a bit more detail today with Grant, when powered by artificial intelligence, organizations can more easily understand their internal capabilities, their internal gaps, and then access talent pools, both within and outside the organization, to use total talent in a way to accelerate business strategy. We're going to spend a little bit of time understanding why a single talent intelligence platform enables a more holistic and strategic and global approach, both to talent acquisition and talent management, and how Eightfold serves these opportunities to individuals based on unique capabilities and career aspirations at scale. So looking forward to getting deep into this conversation. And David, I'll turn it back over to you. And thanks again for the time.
All right. Thank you, Mihir. Caroline, move us forward. So with this, we'll spend about 10 minutes or so. I want to set the stage for the conversation and highlight a couple of findings from the paper that we published. If you move us forward again, quick bit of background on this paper here. So Talent Tech Labs, we published this in partnership with with Eightfold. Topic is the case for a unified talent intelligence platform for talent management and acquisition. And really the kind of inspiration for this, we're starting to see many of the larger talent acquisition technology vendors, dipping their toes or getting into talent management in various ways, either by building out capabilities internally, by acquiring other companies, in various ways. And so, some around internal mobility, some around internal gig marketplaces and the like. And conceptually, we thought that this potential convergence could be a big positive for organizations. And we wanted to understand, to what extent is this actually happening and what are the implications? And so our thesis is kind of at the end of the day, the company that can hire and retain the best talent wins. And we think that having a unified approach and strategy, seem better than kind of the historical model where you've got these two separate technology stacks, these two separate kind of operational functions for managing candidates versus your employees. That said, this kind of thing's obviously easier said than done. And so, one of the things we were really excited about is, especially working with Eightfold, is that we got access to some of the underlying data and metrics associated with some of these programs that are doing both. And we were able to hear firsthand from clients kind of the real world learnings, impact, challenges from implementing this strategy. So I'll answer two questions kind of right up front. First thing is that we're going to send a copy of this paper to everybody who's attending today. And the second question is for the slide deck itself. We'll send that as well. All right. With that, you can move us forward, Caroline. All right. So first question is why now? What are the kind of the big picture context for this change? So there's kind of, in our view, 4 key drivers. So the first one's fast changing requirements in the capabilities landscape. And really what this is talking about is that the skills required for today's workforce are significantly different than the skills required, say, 10 years ago, or even just 5 years ago. A lot of this is driven by technological change, which is impacting the skills that companies require. And since the pace of innovation is not slowing down, we expect this to keep accelerating. There's a lot of impacts here, but primarily it impacts companies' kind of need and ability to assess their internal capabilities versus, what they need to hire today and, what they need to hire for in the future. Do we have the right mix of skills for today and tomorrow? And if not, how are we going to address those gaps equitably? Secondly, velocity of hiring is greatly increased. It's kind of 2 drivers here. The first one is a longer term shift towards away from kind of the 20-year career at one company followed by pension towards more of a tour of duty type of career. And the second is because of the pandemic. So the pandemic kind of just disrupted the entire labor market, and the velocity at which hiring slowed down and then came back again is kind of unprecedented. We'll see that in just a second. Third driver is that the people have been thinking about this idea of kind of like total talent management, total talent acquisition for a long time. But really technology hasn't existed to support it until recently. And so specifically kind of 3 technologies have come together to make this possible. One's really fast cloud computing at enterprise scale. Second one is kind of constant high-speed internet access, kind of globally accessible. And then third, importantly, is advances in AI have made kind of working on a lot of the data that's generated now possible. So these 3 things have come together and made this type of a platform possible. And then the final thing is just that candidates have a lot more options themselves. And so, our thesis, the same way that employers have more options in how they advertise jobs and how they attract talent and how they market their brand, candidates have a lot more options in how they search for a job and the employers that they want to work with. And so we think candidate experience is incredibly important. And by extension, your internal employee experience is important too, because every employee that you're able to retain is another candidate that you don't need to hire. So we think that the more holistic view you can take with talent at, regardless the stage of their journey, whether they've just visited your career site, maybe applied for a job, whether they've been working for you and maybe they're working on a short-term project, or maybe it's an internal candidate that you're considering promoting to a C-level position. Regardless, the fuller picture you have of that candidate, the better experience you'll be able to have. And we think a unified platform is really best architected to enable that holistic view. So that's kind of the big picture background context. A couple pages of charts here to back up some of the claims I made. This shows the demand and supply, the ratio of demand and supply for various occupations. And what you can see is that, demand and supply are not in balance. And for many occupations, there's significantly more demand than there is supply. This essentially makes for a very tough recruiting environment. We expect this to kind of get exacerbated as new skills keep coming to market. And so the strategies, that might have worked 10 years ago for hiring in this kind of environment don't necessarily work today. Move us forward again, Caroline. This here shows U.S. employment from January 2000 to the end of last year, beginning of this year. And as you can see, we had the biggest nominal dip in employment since 2000 as a result of the pandemic. If you look over to the kind of right-hand side of the chart here. And what we saw in the market is a lot of companies froze their hiring. They stopped hiring. They slowed their talent investments. They slowed their talent technology investments. But at the same time, we're seeing an almost equally rapid rebound, kind of post-pandemic. And so, we've recovered a little bit more than half the jobs that were lost of the pandemic. And as the vaccine gets distributed through the remainder of the year in the US and globally, we expect there to be kind of a massive rebound in economic activity and subsequently in hiring. And so this is going to strain demands of a lot of talent acquisition and HR departments, particularly since many were kind of streamlined over the course of the pandemic. And so, technology is going to be key here to help you scale as this hiring velocity increases. Move us forward, Kelly. All right. So just wanted to give kind of some quick definitional framework here for what we're talking about when we say talent acquisition versus talent management technology. Talent acquisition technology is generally concerned with all candidate sourcing and engaging activities up to the point that a hire is made. So, for example, it's things like assessments, matching technology, kind of career sites, candidate retargeting, interview scheduling, interview preparation, etc. Talent management technology is generally used to engage, develop, evaluate, and administrate your internal employees, after they've been hired to kind of grow the talent that you already have. And so the kind of core system of record here is the HCM or the HRIS, your payroll system. But then there's typically a lot of ancillary functionality such as internal mobility, succession planning, maybe compensation management or pay equity. And so a lot of kind of ancillary offerings here. And the important point to note, I think, is that, again, historically, these have evolved separately, and they've typically been managed separately in kind of their own silo. And, our thesis is that there are synergies between talent acquisition and management, which is one of the main drivers for kind of adopting this holistic approach. Okay, move us forward. So from a kind of a practical application here, like what are the underlying drivers or what is this deal? So this shows basically kind of a framework for understanding how business leaders think about this. And it's one way you might articulate the kind of value here if you're building a business case. So on the left, you've got essentially the questions you want to ask these are the questions you want to ask that business leaders are trying to figure out. On the right, you've got that rephrased into the business problems that they're actually trying to solve. So what talent do we need to be successful? This is essentially a skills and capabilities analysis internally, which leads you to, what is my workforce capable of? Which leads to what are my talent gaps? Where do I need to hire? And then how are you going to fill those gaps in the short term and the long term? And if you move us forward, really this whole approach boils down to these kind of four key areas here. What is our talent? What talent does our organization need to be successful? What skills and capabilities? What do we have today? Comparing those two things, where do gaps exist? And some of those gaps are going to be short-term or be able to solve in the short term. And some of those are going to be longer-term gaps. And there's multiple strategies you could take to solve for those, which might be hiring externally, might be hiring contingent workers. It might be training some of your people internally. It might be creating an avenue where people can participate in side work internally. And so with that, I think this is a nice place to kind of pivot, and we'll actually talk to Grant about some of the actual real world applications here. And we'll come down from our ivory tower and get into the world of actual facts and case studies. So talk about use of AI and holistic talent strategy with TriNet. Kelly, if you move us forward again so we can see all of our faces. Grant, want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and TriNet as well.
Sure, thanks, David. So let's start with TriNet. TriNet's a professional employer organization, provides small and medium-sized businesses with full-service HR solutions tailored by industry. We, it's to free the SMBs from HR complexities. TriNet offers access to human capital expertise, benefits, risk mitigation, and compliance, payroll, and real-time technology. And a strapline I love to share is, from Main Street to Wall Street, TriNet implies SMBs to focus on what matters most and growing their business. So for those of you that live in California, if you go up and down the 101, there's a big billboard there. For those in New York, I think you can go to Times Square and regularly see the banners up there. I myself have been in talent acquisition for over 20 years. I started in the UK on the agency side. I then went to RPO and was on site, and then worked my way into my first full in-house role with Gilead Sciences. Spent 11 years with them in Europe, expanding Europe and Asia. And then I came and spent 3 years, just over 3 years in the US, running worldwide talent acquisition before moving to TriNet. And right now, I have a team of about 40 under me, responsible for talent acquisition, HR operations, and HR technology. I have been a fan of, and let's just put Eightfold to one side, but I've been looking through my career at what is, we have all these different technologies in talent acquisition. And in all honesty, we implement them, we put them on top of each other, we don't fully optimize them. And so you've got a mishmash of technologies trying to do everything for you. And I've been looking for something to replace the ATS, and Eightfold just happened to come on to the radar as a tool that could sit between. I could bookend Eightfold with my ATS, and that's exactly where I wanted to go, because replacing an ATS is a lot of work. Implementing Eightfold was much easier, and it gave me exactly what I needed. So that's the little journey of TriNet, me, and where we are today with Eightfold.
Great, that's a good introduction. Okay, cool. So let's move forward. So we'll start with kind of a standard case study format here. So we'll go from kind of where you started, how you implemented, and then kind of what your current state is and what your future state's going to look like. So starting the journey, so I'm Grant, maybe you can walk us through how this all got started. What business problems were you looking to, what business challenges were you having that you were looking to solve? And, how did you build the business case internally to get this going?
Sure. So there were, I touched on one of the areas was I wanted to simplify the TA stack, and I wanted to ensure that everything was fully integrated and the data we were getting out of the system didn't require a whole nother team to manipulate it to get us the insights we needed. So that was the kind of overarching, how do I simplify here? In addition to that, I was looking at recruiter capacity and capability. And as I was doing rough math, right? I was saying if a recruiter can reach out to 4 candidates an hour and they work an 8-hour day, that's 32 candidates a day. If I times that by 5 days, I'm getting up to 150 candidates. And then, how much time do they spend screening them and submitting them and managing them through the process? And what I realized is you need an army of sources. And sources perform at different performance levels, right? Some days they're on, sometimes they're not on. Sometimes they get sick, sometimes they get disengaged, sometimes they go out on holiday, right? And as I started to look at the different technologies, Eightfold was bringing a tool that could take a lot of data and manage it very quickly. It doesn't switch off, right? And actually, it complements the recruiter or a sourcer. And so that was my aha moment, is if I start to think about replacing people that I have, the industry that has been so good to me, I'm going to become public enemy number one. So how can I find a tool that can optimize them and allow them to do the job that they really like to do, right? Less about the finding of the candidate and validating the candidate, more about speaking to the candidate, understanding the EQ of the candidate, and then allowing the recruiter to really use those technical and EQ insights as they work with the business on why this is the right candidate for them. ATSs are not very experience friendly. We know they are configured in a more compliance style design, and you've got to go through these gates to get to the next gate. And if you're running in certain geographies, you've got GDPR, you've got a whole lot of questions. You can't upload a Pages document. Some of them only take a Word document or a PDF. So you've got all these experiential challenges that the ATSs of today, right? I'm not saying in the future that would be different, bring to the table. And so again, to rip this tool out and replace it with something else is costly. You're probably not top of the portfolio when it comes to business investments. And so that for me was the other challenge, right? Is we had a tool that wasn't necessarily friendly to the talent we were driving. And then how can I use this TA technology to support DE&I, right? And whether that be that I'm capturing the right data, that I can report on that data, or that the system can tell me, hey, you have this many diverse candidates in your database. And by the way, the recruiters are accessing them, everything from diverse candidates on every slate to this person's not got any diverse candidates on the slate. And so those three components really were the aha moment to go to the business and say, I can have somebody sourcing 24/7. I don't need you to do a complete system implementation. I can layer this in. And by the way, this is going to drive DE&I both from a candidate experience perspective, but also, hey, look, this is a talent management component. And further on, I'll get into that talent management component.
That's great. I'm sure your HR operations team was happy that they didn't have to do a rip and replace of the ATS, as was whoever your ATS is. Yeah. Cool. So I think that's a good segue. So we've got the business case that you brought. Obviously, you got buy in there. So let's move it forward, Caroline. And this is an area, so ensuring success. So basically, once you start, you've decided to move forward, you've decided to implement this, you see you see the potential benefits. But where we've seen a lot of companies stumble, for lack of a better word, is in the implementation process and really in driving user adoption. And so wonder if you can talk us through, how did you actually roll this implementation out? How did you get your internal users to start actually using the tool? How did you get it integrated with, were there any challenges along the way with doing kind of the integration into your ATS? Are there any learnings that you had overall?
Yeah, and absolutely. So let's start with that last comment. Were there any challenges? Let's be fair. Eightfold is a 4-year-old, maybe coming up to 4.5-year-old company, right? And so there are always going to be, I would rather use a positive term, but there are always going to be opportunities that you will come about. And so one of them early on was, hey, we can integrate with your ATS, no problem. One question that, or one challenge you've got is not all companies equally implement their ATSs in the way that the ATS was meant to be implemented. And so, think about your data sets and build time into that process, right? Really get to understand what is the data you want to bring across, how much of it do you want to bring across, and do it properly. Because one of the lessons we've learned, and luckily we did do it well, is the machine learns from everything. It learns from the good behavior and it learns from the bad behavior. So if you're putting bad in, right, you have to somehow go and clean that up. But starting at the top, we turned this into an enterprise-wide implementation because I promoted this tool as not a talent acquisition tool, but as a business solution, right? This is here to solve our hiring needs. I was very fortunate that I had somebody on my team who had been a TA coordinator, a recruiter and had worked in HR operations, had previously been involved in implementing our ATS. And so really understood the infrastructure, the challenges, the data, and the technology needs. And so again, that would be my first thing, is have somebody really strong that builds very quick credibility, right? And again, it's easy in talent acquisition to say, I'm going to take my top person and put them in there. When you start to do the leveling up, right, you might not have somebody that has that impact and influence, not because they're not capable, just they haven't been exposed to the business, right? And so you don't want to be building the plane and flying it at the same time. Again, I mentioned we used this as a means to educate the business. So we did a lot of work using our intranet site, announcing the signing of Eightfold, that Eightfold was coming. And we took it right the way back. We assumed that nobody in the business understood what AI meant in talent acquisition. And so we posted very basic Eightfold videos that I think are probably 4 years old, on our source, which is our intranet, allowing our hiring managers and all colleagues to go in and learn about what is AI, what is machine learning, what is it in the context of talent acquisition and talent management. And so we kept drip feeding them the information and getting them conversant with it, that when we launched the tool, there weren't questions about the AI or concerns about the AI. They were immediately going to the, how do I use this tool and how do I get the benefit out of it? And we saw very early success, right? We saw hiring, and my boss was adamant when I came to him and said, are we going to do a pilot with masked resumes? And she said, no, I think we should go live with all masked resumes, at which point I swallowed and I was like, okay, I hope I can make this work. Funnily enough, there was no need to be concerned. And so, yes, we had people asking questions, intelligent questions, but ultimately the recruiters now submit a masked pipeline of candidates live. They go in with the managers and calibrate. I'll share a small story that we've got some managers where the recruiters are doing volume hiring, and so they don't need to keep calibrating with the hiring manager. They've got it. And the hiring managers, as I've gone around the business, have said, yeah, I don't know whatever happened, but I used to enjoy doing the thumbs up and down, and that luxury seems to be taken away from me. I'd love to have it back, right? And so we've used it as a means to really help the business understand, here's the talent pool, here's how the system is stack ranked, here are the indicators, this is why the system is saying this person could be good for the role. And then working with the manager when they put a thumbs up or thumbs down to say, okay, it's thumbs down. Tell us what was missing so that we could feed the machine and we can make the machine more intelligent. I got a message on Friday from our chief architect by his boss to say, phenomenal tool, seeing great candidates and also seeing candidates that I might not have looked at previously. And I think that's the key thing, is we're now getting a view of the whole talent pool, not just the top 10 that the recruiter gets to because they applied in the last hour, and that's, just before the recruiter went in. So again, I would do it from, understand this is a 4-year-old or 4.5-year-old tool. So you've got to go on the journey with them. Understand that you need to have somebody that really is capable of delivering this kind of tool and being technical, but also thinking about the broader engagement of all the constituents in the rollout. And then be bold, right? Roll it out as a business tool, involve the business in them, but educate them, take them on that journey and create that buzz that something's coming. I'll tell you a very funny story that I had to do a video early on. The Eightfold team said, it'd be great if you got a video. I'm showing my age here. I should have just used the editing tool. I took 42 takes to get this perfect 30-second video. By the end of it, I was like, I'm never doing that again. But that, it's all that investment in really taking the company on the journey with you.
I'd like, if you don't mind, just jump in really quickly. I think one of the things that was most notable for us at Eightfold, with the way that Grant and TriNet rolled it out, was the discussion around it as a business tool. And you know, as Grant talks about the engagement between the hiring managers and the recruiters or the talent team, the idea that you're discussing not one individual versus another, one candidate versus another, but is our calibration right? Are we thinking about the right things when we're looking at the slate of candidates? So it immediately removes the you know, almost sometimes adversarial relationship where a recruiter is saying, you should really consider this individual. And the hiring manager say, I actually really want this profile. And instead, the conversation is around, here's the slate of people that the technology is consistently saying for, you know, across all of our roles, across all of our positions. And it takes that sort of personal component out of it. It's really about the skills and capabilities and potential. And then the conversation becomes, how do we advise on either increasing or decreasing that aperture based on the slate of candidates you're seeing? I'd like to see people with a bit more of this type of experience. Then the technology allows you to show candidates with that kind of experience, not go back and do another sourcing exercise. And so the involvement and the collaboration, you're using Eightfold as the collaboration point between the hiring managers of the business and the talent teams. What was novel was how we designed the product, but the way that Grant had rolled it out with the amount of training and advanced sort of change management before the rollout was what was remarkable. And so I just want to point that out because I think you guys executed that exceptionally well.
Thank you. It's a great, starting from the sidelines, what you now see is hiring managers are getting a greater insight into the holistic talent pool that I'm not sure, and I don't, this is not criticism, right? It's just a reality, but the amount of times when I've come in and I've taken over a TA team, and what you find is the bottom of the funnel, so how many interviews and how many hires and how many candidates rejected the offer is the only data that is being shared with the hiring manager. And we forget to share, hey, I reached out to 300 people. Of the 300, 200 didn't reply. Of the 100 that replied, only 20 are interested, right? And so those 2 or 3 weeks from intake to showing your first long list seems, you know, managers turn around and say, well, you only got 2 candidates to show me after 2 weeks of work. Now they're kind of getting much more of a feel for what is out there, right? Because very quickly, as Mihir said, you can change the search or you can, or the criteria, and it opens or closes the talent pool. And so live, you can show, I mean, you used to be able to do some of that with LinkedIn when you changed your search, but I genuinely think we're bringing hiring managers much closer to the activity in a controlled way. And it's to the benefit of all of us, right? They understand, we understand, and candidates are getting better calibration out of that.
That's great. The only last question I have here, and then we'll move on, Grant, would be, you know, in terms of initial reaction, did you have to overcome at all any sense from, say, your sourcing team where they were worried about kind of, you know, internal disruption to their job?
Not so much nervousness about their job. It's recruiters have grown up working in a certain way, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years, right? A requisition opens, I take it, I post it to one of the, you know, the familiar sites, I wait, I get in, I go through, and I submit. And so we did make some changes around some of the tools the recruiters had access to. And so now getting them to do an advertising rec in Eightfold, right, to see what Eightfold's pulling, or to drive recruitment marketing to feed into Eightfold, into the talent pool. It's a different way of sourcing, and it's uncomfortable, right? It's just, this is not how I've done it. And so I'm under pressure, I've got KPIs, they're targets we have to hit. And so we're working on, you know, getting the team familiar, saying, hey, the business, we're getting them to actually calibrate in the system. So that's a big win. You know, here's a way of building up the talent pool. And we're focusing on doing that in a inclusive way, right? How do we not just throw another 100,000 people into the talent pool or talent community we have within Eightfold? How can we touch the different sources, right? So from a diversity, equity, inclusion perspective. So this talent pool that we're continuously building, validating and calibrating, right? Over time, we should be able to look into it and go, we know that one out of 2 hires should be a diverse hire because we have the right talent pool to support that, right? Now that is an aspiration, but those are that's the change. On the recruiter side, they see it with the hiring manager. You just have to manage that they don't go too quickly to saying, okay, you've calibrated, I know what you're looking for, so I'll carry on calibrating. And we've also seen we've now got some instances where we've calibrated a role, we've submitted 5 candidates, they haven't met the mark, and we've gone back to the calibration. And so giving us a good data point to say, what did we miss on the first round that we had to go back and recalibrate? And I think it also helps the managers that we're not just hacking away at the same dead wood, right?
Right. That's cool.
You know, it's interesting. I was just a quick example. I was in a recent training with a client, and they were showing some of the candidates that were surfacing as high matches for specifically for a data scientist role. And one of the newer recruiters, it was a mix of recruiters and hiring managers that were in this training. And one of the newer recruiters said, you know, why would we look at that particular candidate? They were rejected 9 months ago for when they applied to another role at the company. And the hiring manager happened to be in the room at the time. And the hiring manager said, yeah, I actually remember that person. I rejected her because she was too junior for a senior data scientist role. But this is a data scientist role. She actually would be a great fit. The recruiter in the training actually sent an email to that candidate saying, hey, we have your resume on file. We're reaching back out because now we have a new position that's opened up that we think you could be a great fit for. Before the end of the training, the candidate wrote back, and I wish I had screenshotted the email, but it was along the lines of, I thought I'd never hear from you again after I got the rejection email that said, we're keeping your resume on file. But lo and behold, the outreach worked, and she ended up being hired a couple of weeks later. But I think it just goes to show some of these sort of biases around how we think about our own talent network and the value of the talent network, let alone sort of that secondary piece, which is the candidate experience. You know, the candidate experience doesn't end when the application ends. In fact, that relationship, and we talked about sort of the depth of the relationship that you build through recruiting, how it lasts over a longer period of time, you know, beyond maybe just the application itself.
And the employee referral, right? If you think about it historically, I refer David in for a role. David's either qualified or not. David is qualified, he gets the job. He isn't qualified, he goes into that black hole, and maybe somewhere somebody surfaces him again, right? Or maybe he just stays in the black hole. With Eightfold, the system says, hey, David, you were right for this job. Actually, here are 2 other jobs that you would be better suited for. And so you're now maximizing your employee referrals, where even if they write for one job, they could fit 2 or 3 other jobs. And then you're getting to choose which has got the highest business need, where do I put them? And if you do drop back into the kind of talent pool, the system's continuously looking at opportunities, says, here's a role that David is good for. So if your talent is bringing good talent into the employee referral program, you are getting more than one hit out of that candidate. You're getting multiple hits and opportunities. So.
Great. Ken, let's move it forward to the next one. So Grant, want to ask you here, through the conversations we've had, one of the things we've seen is for this to work pretty well, it's not just selecting the technology, it's also the people or process that manage it, and those tend to have to change as well. And so, you know, in almost every conversation we've had with somebody who's gone through this journey, there's been some change to, you know, their TA or their HR team. So want to ask you, Grant, you know, how does your people or process change? Does your talent acquisition or HR team look or operate differently, you know, today than it did before?
Yeah, so we did make some changes to the way our TA team worked. We had to build in the workflow of Eightfold, and we had to build in some of the changes we made around around other sources that we were using. What I will say I scratched my head a little bit is, okay, does this replace sourcing? Does it complement sourcing? Do they conflict with each other? And I think we found a good middle ground with it, where sources are still good to go out there and use the sourcing tools, right? And what we're looking for them to do is to source candidates that are a good general match and bring them into Eightfold. And as they bring them into Eightfold, they can go back to that kind of broad search capability that they deploy. What Eightfold's doing is then saying, thank you for bringing this person to the front door. I'm going to measure them, I'm going to weigh them, and then I'm going to build a suit for them. And they're going to go, yes, there's a suit that fits, a Trinet suit that fits them, or no, this person's never going to fit one of the Trinet suits. And so, as Mihir said, the candidate experience becomes much improved, where we're managing somebody in and then looking after them and always attentive towards them, or we're bringing them to the front door and we're saying, you know, we don't think that this is the house that you should be staying at, and then being fair to them, right? We're allowing them to go off in a structured way, not leaving them hanging and wondering where their application is or will they ever get a job. From a recruiting perspective, the recruiters have got power, right? They can go into a meeting not saying, here are 20 people on paper that I think match your job. They're going in, they're saying, here are 10 people that have been calibrated by the system, and here are the reasons they've been calibrated and stack ranked as they are. So think about those intelligence points that they're getting to have a discussion on, right? This person has, you know, these 3 skills, you were looking for 5, but hang on, right? They've also had this experience and that experience. So it becomes a more informed conversation that they have. The recruiters are not having to, you know, find 2 diverse candidates to make sure the slate is diverse. What they're doing is they're doing it with the masked resumes. The manager goes in and calibrates with them, and at the end of the calibration, they unmask it, right? And so the candidates with the best match for the role get selected. And at that point, it's unblinded, which means if we have diverse candidates in play, then fantastic. If we don't have diverse candidates in play, what do we need to do to improve the diversity of that talent pool, which then informs our recruitment marketing strategy? And so I certainly have seen some of the recruiters that really get this, right, understand that they can go and have a rich discussion with hiring managers. I've got one of my senior hire recruiting managers who's had 2 really good meetings in a very difficult part of the business. And in both instances, the business thought that we needed to go to external resources to help us with these roles. And on both occasions, the early look from what the activity we've had out of Eightfold is suggesting that we've got the quality that we need to move forward with. So I think recruiters will take some time, and eventually there'll be an aha moment, right? Where, hey, if I get the sequence right, this could work really well for me. But it's new, and it's like anything, right? If I've always driven a car on the left-hand side of the road and tomorrow you make me drive it on the right-hand side, it's going to be uncomfortable for a while, and then I get, then become second nature.
Grant, I'm actually curious, at TriNet, do your recruiters handle internal applicants as well, employee applicants?
They do.
And so have you started using, so when they present the panel or the slate, are they presenting internal applicants alongside external applicants?
They are, yeah.
And they're mapping them, I think, then it sounds like it's apples to apples across those talent pools.
Correct. Now, of course, we're not deploying internal headhunting, right? Because that's the other challenge you have there. But what we are able to say is to highlight that there's an internal candidate that could be as good a match for the role. Where we're using it a lot at the moment is doing skills inventory. Hey, we have a business.
Do that. So let's get forward. Walk us through that. Yeah, and Caroline, if you want to move the slide forward as well. Go ahead, Grant.
Skills inventory. Let's think back to about 12 months ago. There was a little thing, that little flu that broke out, and we had frontline workers that were essential to the business, and we needed to make sure we had enough people to do those roles. But what happens if they can't do the roles? Who else do we have? And I had 2 people from my team that literally did a manual process and went in and searched through LinkedIn to see who had the skills, built out a matrix, and we were doing the kind of, borrowing steam from Peter to play Paul, excuse me, to achieve the business support. Fast forward 12 months, if we have a similar instance like that, the ability to go in and put a profile into Eightfold and say, I need skills 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, who in the organization has them, we're going to get back a list of everyone that has them today, had them yesterday, and potentially could have them in the future because they're 1 or 2 modules away, if I use the term module, away from having that full skill set. And so I don't think companies have had the opportunity to do a skills inventory that is validated internally and externally, that at the push of a button, if half the organization won the lottery tomorrow because they were all in a syndicate and walked, how would I cover that half of the work? Today I can.
That's incredible. Cool. And then I think curious to know, number one, how long has it been live? What are kind of early wins? And as I understand, you're using this a little bit for kind of internal promotion or just kind of holistic record keeping, so to speak. Can you talk about that use case a little bit as well? It seemed like a pretty novel one.
So we went live in November. So we are 5 months in. 5 months. 5 months in on it. It's been smooth for us. Have we had a couple of glitches? Yes, we have. Has it been like a normal piece of new technology? Right, it has. But we've had fantastic support from the Eightfold team. And that's been important, right? When we've needed them and we've needed to brainstorm. I think the wins for us are, we are doing the masked resumes on everyone, right? That has to be a win. Without, and let me come in. We're doing masked resumes without business pushback. That just shows that the business understand the power of this tool, that we're not forcing them to take a certain type of talent. We're actually helping them understand who is the best talent or best match for the role. And then secondly, hopefully that person is diverse in some shape or form. The big wins, one of our VPs was hired through Eightfold. We put the job profile in, the system worked its magic. They popped up in the top 5, and they were went through the process and got hired. So it does work, right? Put it that way. We had last week feedback from another VP to say, I'm in a technical part of the area. I didn't think I would see talent, and I've actually seen interesting talent, meaning candidates I wouldn't have normally seen, that your usual candidates that get thrown up. And so those for me are the wins. I've got the managers going in and calibrating live with the recruiters. I've got the recruiters doing the masked resumes. We had as many colleagues as we could get to go in and create their profiles in the system. That's still a piece of work for us to go back, and we're working with Eightfold on how do we report out on who's put a profile in, whose profile is up to date, and when last did they update it, so that we keep that kind of talent card very relevant. We've been able to use the tool to do a skills inventory for a certain part of the business. And then, as I mentioned to you, the last piece is, we see this as a means to really level the playing field when it comes to internal hiring promotion from a DE&I perspective, right? We're putting the ownership back into the we call them colleagues' hands, where go and build a profile, understand how your profile maps to careers internally, who are the people internally you could go and speak to and have as mentors to tell you how did they take that journey. And then, at the end of it, if there's a learning opportunity into the LMS, take the additional training courses and round out your experience. And so when promotion decisions come about, there is data to support whether if two candidates are neck and neck, which employee deserves that promotion because they're neck and neck, right? And you've now got data on both sides to support that. So, we're excited. There's still a long way to go to optimize and build out reporting suites, but I think this is a tool that am I going to say it's the best tool in the world? It is, because I acquired it and I'm using it. Do I think there's other tools on the market? Yes, there are. But for me, this worked. Right? This was one tool that I could get. If you think about everything you could get, and there's now the release of the content management system, just the components that it all brings together, where all the data and the reporting is in one system, just for me is hit the mark and where I wanted to go. So thank you.
That's great. Caroline, you can move us forward. Let's keep trucking along. One comment I'll make here. We got about 10 minutes left. And so for those on the line, if you want to ask a question, I'd encourage you to get it in now. If you've got something burning you want to ask, feel free to submit it. If not, we probably won't have time to get to it. So a couple of topical areas I wanted to hit. First one is on diversity. I'll just caveat this by saying we do a survey each year of talent acquisition HR professionals. And in years past, one of the questions we ask about is company strategic priorities. And in years past, diversity has been on there, but it's like number 6, 7 or 8 kind of on the list. And last year it was number 1 by, the margin of like 2 to 3 times its kind of next nearest strategic priority. So diversity has become important to organizations around the world, which is great. The question, we're often asked is, what is actually working? How are you driving? What are the technologies that actually work and the strategies that actually work here? And so, Grant, just curious if you could talk a little bit about what you guys are doing and what's working.
Yeah, so I think there's 4 main pieces. On the talent acquisition side, the system is allowing us to see what is our diversity population within the talent pool. We're then able to see how that population is being considered by the recruiting function, right? And if we do have any instances of bias, and it might be conscious or unconscious, right? But at least it gives us a view to address it early on and course correct. Similarly, we can look at that same view with hiring managers and say we have a hiring manager that maybe is only looking at a certain type of candidate. Is that planned, or is that by accident? And so we could get in under the hood and we can do that diagnosis. And so that intelligence allows it to not be what I would call some of the draconian approaches to driving DE&I, which we know over the years is not paid off, right? If you look at the Rooney Rule, after 10 years, it hadn't met the requirement it was set out to do. So we have the luxury of understanding who's in our talent pool, how are the recruiters accessing and engaging with them, how are the hiring managers considering them or not, and what do we need to do to change that? And then we have the masked resumes, which is, hey, you can look at the best candidates that the talent pool has thrown up, and you can make a choice on who you want to meet, and then we unblind them. And so any biases are not coming into the play around the decision around the diversity. And then on the flip side, I shared with you earlier how we look at this being deployed in the talent management space is freeing the hiring manager up to not be solely responsible for the development and management of the diverse workforce, right? Because there can be pros and cons to that. And similarly, we're putting the responsibility into the employer's hands to say, if you want to grow towards this role, this is how you can, the system says you could, this is how you can do it. Here are the people that can help you do that. Oh, and by the way, and here are the courses that can round you out. And so again, if I'm a diverse candidate and feel that I've been overlooked for an opportunity, I have data points that can now talk to, here's what I've done to ready myself for that position. And similarly, I think if somebody does come and push hard on saying I should be promoted and I should be in that role, if we look at the data and the data shows they haven't got a profile set up, they haven't been career mapped, they haven't identified any mentors, and they haven't taken a course, you know, that's an easier conversation for the hiring manager and the HR business partner to have. So I think the tool will continue to bring different aspects of DE&I together. There's always the ongoing discussion around, does AI create a risk around if bad intelligence gets in there, and it's biased, right, does it replicate itself? Yes, there's always that risk. But that's the importance of hiring managers always calibrating the talent so that we are continuously in real time adding and feeding the machine, and then Eightfold on their side are running the various tests and algorithms to ensure that bias is not building in the system.
You know, I'd like to touch on that for a second, because I think an interesting part of that, you know, when we think about diversity, we often think about gender, we think about underrepresented minorities, but then there's also populations of people, and I'm thinking specifically here about military veterans who are incredibly well trained, who are incredibly ambitious, but are also incredibly humble. And how they think about displaying themselves or demonstrating their skills, or even, you know, talking about themselves, it's a very different language, right? And you know, one of the things that we did at Eightfold, we won the Department of Labor's Veterans Challenge last year, that validated our mapping of their MOCs or their internal codes to civilian jobs. And so when we talk about, you know, allowing for insight into, and this is where the power of the global data come in to supplement people's maybe sometimes bare profiles or skills they may have forgotten that they have, or maybe they talk about them or frame them differently, and you know, that's a diversity of communication that we run into quite a bit. But you know, these other populations like military veterans, helping them understand you shouldn't be self-limiting, but then also helping the hiring teams and hiring managers recognize this person may not have said these skills in these words, but here's what they're actually capable of doing. And so I think across the board on the TM side and the TA side, there's just undiscovered potential that that we can surface if we debias the right way, you know, with the right tools. But of course, it takes the people, as you say, Grant, to help drive this to the right. There's no silver bullet, right? You have to have the right technology, the right people, and the right process. And so, you know, hopefully we're one of the right technologies, and we're looking for partners with the right people and the right process, like yourself.
Thanks.
That's great. I think for the sake of time, I was going to say it was a good segue into the AI question, but I think you know, we're running right up on the hour. Caroline, do you want to move us forward to the end? I guess the last thing we'll ask you, Grant, you know, final thoughts or feedback for your peers on the line here that are thinking on getting started. Any kind of final recommendations or advice for the folks on the call?
Yeah, you know, do your due diligence. For me, Eightfold worked well for TriNet and what our needs were. Go out and compare the different tools. Listen to the commentators who go, yeah, well, but it doesn't have a good front end, or the career site's not that great. Listen to all of those comments, but also determine the readiness of your organization. Like, what does your organization need? An Uber career site? Does it need, you know, this accelerated talent management, or is it more that it needs something on the TA side? And you know, initially for me is I needed enhanced sourcing, and so this is what the tool brought to me. The DE&I has played out nicely, and so we'll work with the rest of the tool to optimize where possible, but be independent as you think about it, right? Think start with what's the objective you you're trying to solve, and then go through your selection. And if Eightfold's the tool for you, great. And always here to answer questions. I helped somebody in Europe who was thinking about the tool, and there were a couple of questions we covered off, and they're moving. I believe they've moved to become an Eightfold customer.
Great. Thank you, Grant, for taking the time back here. Thank you as well for joining us today. I want to thank everybody for attending. Again, we'll be sending over the paper and a copy of the deck after this call. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Mihir, or Grant. And have a great rest of the day, rest of the week. Thank you so much.